What I'd like to do with this week's lecture videos is to talk a little bit about some of the culture in South Asia and things that have influenced uneven development there. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Green Revolution to kind of prep for what we'll be thinking about with the activity. So this is you all's impression of South Asia as a region. As you can see, India looms large in your impressions, poverty, some of the other countries in the region, such as Pakistan, you have Afghanistan here, religions like Hinduism, things related to climate, that sort of stuff. This is a map that shows the region that we're talking about. You can see the area is bordered by the Himalayan mountains to the north, the Indian Ocean to the south, the Arabian Sea to the west. It's the second most densely populated region on Earth, second only to China, and has a lot of diversity and uneven development in terms of rural and urban areas. Because of this physical geography of the mountain range there and the warm sea surrounding this part of the world, there is really very specific climatic activity that varies from what we've seen in some of the other parts of the world. So you read about earlier in class the idea of orthographic uplift. This is the notion of having this is the idea that as air is traveling over the surface of the earth, if it comes into some sort of obstruction, say a mountain range, the air is pushed up, and as it raises in altitude, the air cools and you have precipitation that will fall on the windward side of the mountain, and the dry air then passes over to the leeward side of the mountain. So you have this sort of effect where the Himalayas mountains are located in South Asia, and this moist air that's coming in off the sea. You have very seasonal pattern of precipitation with cool and dry winters and hot and dry from March to June, and then June to September, a rainy season or monsoon. With the monsoon, then you have this seasonal shift in prevailing wind direction, and this is based on low and high pressure systems that are formed depending on the season. So if you remember from the beginning of the quarter talking about climate, low pressure systems are areas where you have air that's rising, and as that air is rising, more air is pulled in to the region. So you have a low pressure system that forms in the warm months over the Tibetan Plateau, and that pulls in warm, moist air from the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea. That air travels over the subcontinent, and when it hits the Himalayan mountains, you have orthographic uplift and rainfall, extremely heavy rainfall along the southern windward side of those mountains. This is torrential rain of 80 to 150 inches in the course of just a few months, and incredible risk of flooding, especially in really low-lying areas like the country of Bangladesh. During the winter months, where temperatures are cooler, you have a high pressure system. That's when air is sinking, and you have a high pressure system that forms over the Tibetan Plateau, and winds then that are blowing from that area out over the continent to the sea. So dry winds that are happening during that time. So a very seasonal pattern. If we chart out that rainfall, you can see here on this chart the amount of rainfall is the y-axis, and the x-axis is the months of the year. So in most months, you're having less than 4 inches of rain during the year, but in June and July, over 24 inches of rain per month. So 2 feet of rain in just a very short period of time. Though this has been the prevailing climatic pattern and folks have been able to adapt to it to some extent in terms of how they live and agriculture, having these huge amounts of rainfall has caused a lot of damage and widespread flooding. It can be very destructive to agricultural lands and the transportation infrastructure. And with that flooding, there is a lot of risk of the spread of disease, injury, and death. Now, moving on from the physical geography to some of the cultural geography of the region, the area of the Indus River in South Asia is considered a cultural hearth, so a place where a lot of early cultures emerged and developed. Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam all have major influence within the region. Hinduism emerged here in about 6th century BC. Buddhism also began as a religion here, and Islam has come into the region and has a large minority of the population who are practicing Islam. This map shows some of the distribution of folks based on the major religions. So as you can see, India is majority Hindu, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh is majority Muslim, and pockets of Buddhism in places like Bhutan and Nepal, and northern India as well, and then other religions such as Sikhism and Jainism in major pockets as well. I want to talk a little bit about Hinduism because many people in the class might not be that familiar with Hinduism. It's thought of as the world's oldest religion, again, starting in the Indus River Valley and diffusing southward down the Ganges River. It really, like many other religions, absorbed a lot of the existing indigenous native religions and customs that existed there and is practiced in numerous forms throughout South Asia. Hinduism is a rather complex set of beliefs and not really just a religion, but an intricate web of religious, philosophical, social, economic, and artistic elements. Unlike some of the other religions we've discussed earlier in the quarter, there's not really a common creed or doctrine as the basis of the religion. There's no divine revelation and not a rigid moral code. So very different from Christianity, Islam, and Judaism that we've talked about earlier. The major tenets of Hinduism are based around 3 main ideas: reincarnation, karma, and dharma. Reincarnation is the notion that every living thing has a soul, and when a living thing dies, its soul continues on and moves on to another living creatures. So souls are reborn in newly created life. The next important notion is karma, the idea that every action brings about a reaction or certain results, and that there's no ability to escape the consequences of one's action. Therefore, if you behave well, that behavior is rewarded, and your soul is reborn into some sort of higher ranking living creature in the next life. And in contrast, if you behave badly, you'll be reborn into a lower ranking creature. And how that behavior is judged, or to know what you need to do, is this notion of dharma. So these are the rules that must be followed by all living things if they wish to work their way up the ladder of reincarnation. And each person is going to have a different dharma. So in terms of how this plays out in practices, the major practices are puja or worship, the cremation of the dead, and the regulations of the caste system. And the caste system is sort of a social system based on this idea of reincarnation. So the caste system then creates a rank of people in terms of their value within society, and as their kinship group, as their jobs. And the idea then is that you're born into a particular place within the caste system, and the Brahmins are the religious leaders on the top, and the folks on the bottom of the caste system are thought of as the untouchables. These people have the worst of the worst jobs, burning the dead, cleaning latrines, sweeping the streets, and have a lot of discrimination that continues today.